You repeat after me. I take refuge in the Buddha.
I take refuge in the Buddha.
I take refuge in the Dharma.
I take refuge in the Dharma.
I take refuge in the Sangha.
I take refuge in the Sangha.
Keeping the palms joined. Put the palms down. All right, good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Nice to see you all. Thank you for showing up. Anyone here for the first time? Those who are here for the first time, what brings you here?
My friends.
Yeah? What, did they tell you where you were going, or did they lie to you? How'd that work out?
We knew where we were coming. We were excited.
Yeah. They're excited, or you're excited?
I think we all.
Yeah, nice. Well, welcome. Glad you're here.
Thank you.
Same?
Ja, it's just an openness to engage.
Nice. Well, welcome. Yeah.
I came to visit friends on purpose to make sandwiches and to meditate.
Yeah. And you came from where? Colorado, right? Yeah, Connecticut originally.
Correct.
And you claim Normal as your friend. We have all been warned.
I've known him for a lot longer than you have.
Yeah. Maybe we should have you up here for the hour and you can just tell us all about Normal. What do you think?
If you want to see the hall empty out.
Yes. Everybody will scatter.
Forgive me for this, but that's not your normal practice.
But maybe it could be, you know? Welcome, yeah. Hi.
I'm actually from LA, but I'm spending some time in La Jolla with family and so just exploring Buddhist resources.
Nice. Well, do you practice up in LA somewhere? Or is this all new to you?
I actually know I was a monk in a temple in LA for quite a while, but just through some circumstances I've left that lifestyle for some time and helping with my parents.
Yeah.
Because they're struggling with some health issues and so.
I understand more than you probably even know. So yeah, glad you're here. Welcome. Yeah. Anybody else first time here? Yeah, it's always good just to kind of reflect, and I say this often, but just kind of reflect. If it's your first time here, if you keep coming back, if you've been at this for years and still struggling miserably, it's always important just to kind of reflect on the reasons and why you practice, why you do meditation, why you look at Buddhist teachings, why this is important and an important aspect of your life. Always good to reflect on that, because when things become challenging and difficult, which we all know, that's pretty much every day of our life, we're going to face challenges and difficulties. And when we do face them, this practice is something that is always there and we can always come back to remind us of different ways to get through all the challenges and difficulties that we face throughout our life. So always important when I ask that question, or not, I think, to just reflect on why. Why do you do this practice? How does it impact your life? How does it change you? And ultimately, not just you, but how does it change the people around you and the people that have to put up with you, all day long. So with that, we'll sit. To those who are joining virtually, welcome. Glad you're here. Thanks for showing up. A couple things I'll tell you before we begin. For those who might be brand new or maybe here for the first time, nothing's going to happen to you. You're not going to float away. You're not going to have any mystical, magical experiences. The mind that races all day long is not going to shut off. Don't judge your practice, meaning don't ask yourself, is this working or not working? Are you doing it right or wrong? We're just going to sit. We're going to breathe. You'll hear sounds inside the room, sounds outside. This is life. Life is filled with chaos, and this practice is learning to get quiet and still within all of the chaos. Posture, you just want to be comfortable. If you're on a cushion, often it helps slide into the front third. Pushing the stomach forward allows the back to straighten. Hands can be on the knees or lap, whatever is comfortable for you. If you're on a bench or chair, however you're seated, Just trying to be comfortable, sitting up straight if comfortable. If you need to move, simply move. Movement doesn't make you a bad meditator, just means you need to move. And also, if you're brand new, you're not trying to empty your thoughts, you're not trying to go blank, you're not trying to think nothing. Your mind will continue to race. I'll say things periodically to either wake you up because you've fallen asleep or remind you that you're lost in thought and bring you back to the present moment. I will guide us as we begin, and we'll settle into a little bit of silence. And starting with the eyes closed if comfortable, or slightly open. Mouth is open or closed. We'll start with taking 3 deep breaths, slowly. And eventually, settle into a natural rhythm of the breath. Noticing the mind as it wanders, jumping from thought to thought. Start with gently guiding the attention, focus to the stomach or chest. Breathing in, feel them rise. Breathing out, they fall. Simply continue this practice, observing sensation of breath. As the mind wanders, lost in thought. Recognize it. Release that thought. Return attention, focus to the breath. Where's your mind? Lost in thought. Return to breath. letting go of expectations, letting go of judgments from your practice, just sitting, breathing. Learning to be comfortable in stillness, in quiet, wanting nothing but to sit and breathe. body still, rested, and the speech quiet, aware of all sounds, and the mind learning to settle. Know what it's like to just sit and breathe. Knowing with each breath, there's nothing else to do, nowhere else to go, and no one else to be. Everything beautiful, exactly as it is. Sitting, breathing. And once again, taking 3 deep breaths, slowly. And as you slowly open the eyes, slowly beginning to move, and most important, with the practice of meditation, is to recognize how you feel now, immediately after. Compare this to how you typically feel throughout your day. Recognize the difference, if there is one. Ask yourselves how you prefer to feel every day for the rest of your life. And realize however you feel now, if it's quiet, calm, and still, or a busy mind, racing mind, whatever you're sitting with at this moment, has nothing to do with anything I said. It's nothing to do with how you sit and hold the hands or cross the legs. It's nothing to do with the sounds around you or anything else for that matter. It has everything to do with your own mind and your own mind's reaction to an external condition. This is what the Buddha called pratitya samutpata, means dependent origination. This is the basis of the Buddha's awakening. The word Buddha simply means awakened. He was a human being, no different than any one of us, who began to understand why he suffered, why he got angry, sad, depressed, stressed, anxious. He began to understand the causal relationship of all phenomena. What that means, very simply, for all of us, regardless of where you come from or what you believe in or where you think you're going, your whole life is filled with things that happen. You react. More stuff happens. More reactions. That's it. That's what we get. This practice is simply learning what it's like to respond to something quietly, peacefully, still. Because for most of us, the way we responded to the last 20 minutes is quite different from how we respond to every other 20-minute period of your day. And so all we're working on is closing the gap to where the way you feel now is closer to how you feel always. Just as driven, motivated, productive, successful, whatever that means to you in your respective lives. But with a mind that's steady, clear, focused, distracted by nothing, disturbed by no one. It's not an easy practice. It's not necessarily fun. It's not an escape, as often people think it is. It's direct perception into the present moment. And the present moment, as we know, is too often filled with conflict, chaos, difficulties, challenges. So this is learning to be with life as it arises and not running from people and places and things, which is where we spend so much of our time. Meditation is free. Buddhist practice is free. It's just sitting, breathing, learning to be kind to yourself and everybody else you encounter every moment of your life. Once we stop trying to change, fix, control, manipulate everything and everyone around us, and we work on changing our mind and our reactions to the world around us, life gets simpler. But a lot of that is letting go of our effort and attempt to control everything, which I'm sure no one in this room ever tries to do, so not sure why I even bring it up. But it's learning to see what's happening, become aware of your thoughts, your words, your actions in each moment. This is what karma is. Karma is not what goes around comes around. Karma is not getting what you deserve or they're getting what they deserve. Karma is what we bring into the world. As the Buddha taught, we generate karma, cultivate karma 3 ways: body, speech, mind, thoughts, words, and actions. So everything we think, everything we say, and everything we do has an impact. And that is this practice. Every moment it doesn't change, it doesn't get any more complicated than that. No matter how much you might try to complicate this in your life, ultimately this practice is, what's the intention behind my thoughts, my words, and my actions? And what does that create? And then when I go into the world and I engage with the world, what are my thoughts, words, and actions, and my intentions? So, with that, I'll pause. For me, always really prefer just to respond to questions, meditation, Buddhist practice, anything you're sitting with. And to those who are joining virtually, again, welcome, glad you're here. Feel free to say hello as you are in the chat box. If you have any questions, you can put them there. I'll do my best to respond. And we'll use the rest of our brief time this morning for questions.
So I am a super control freak. And I was so sick for 3 weeks, I couldn't control anything.
Yeah.
Like, it all went away and I couldn't do my practice. And I started to get angry and violent and even racist in my thinking. So my comment is the Four Noble Truths are true. And what you once shared with me when we had a dispute about anger coming from suffering is absolutely true. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Yeah, it's, just to kind of paraphrase a little bit for those maybe virtually didn't hear it, and maybe just kind of expressing it in other ways. One, I appreciate you sharing that and saying that, to begin to recognize first and foremost that this idea of control, it really is such an illusion. And, even in those moments where you're not feeling well and you feel like your practice has fallen away, it's a reminder that, very often on this path, we're so conditioned, I think, to think, and you may have heard me say this before, but we're so conditioned to think that, everything is like a level, and that we're supposed to, kindergarten, then first grade and second grade, and then, everything in our lives, it's supposed to just continuously get better or increase. And I think with any spiritual practice, it doesn't work that way. It initially seems like kind of that thrill, that honeymoon stage, that excitement of like, wow, this is great, I love it. And then we're faced with being sick and we're like, well, that just felt as shit. And everything you think that you were working on and cultivating, it just got thrown back in your face. But those moments are important because it's opportunities, as you are sharing, to reflect on, wow, if I don't focus on the Four Noble Truths and really the core basic Buddhist teachings, it brings me back to being a way that I don't want to be anymore. And that's a beautiful realization. The challenge, which you may or may not be facing right now because you didn't necessarily say this, but for anybody, all of us really, the challenge is when you have those moments where you start to kind of see like, wow, this is, I mean, for you, it's not easy for people to say that they have racial tendencies and to have racist views. That's very difficult for most people to say in a room full of basic strangers. That's beautiful. Thank you for being honest, because most people wouldn't say that. And so to recognize these things is really important. And to also recognize that as you recognize them, to do it with love and compassion for yourself. That's the piece I just want to make sure that you and everybody really remembers, that as we begin to see these things in our mind that are really not good, by good meaning they're just not healthy. They're not healthy for us, they're not healthy for others, they're not healthy for the communities we're living in. They're just toxic. And to be able to recognize these things within ourselves, because we all have them, right? Regardless of how much privilege one has or doesn't have, we all have them to some extent, some more so than others. Meaning these views that are unhealthy. And to recognize them and then add loving kindness and compassion toward yourself for having them is really important. Otherwise, you'll just fall back into hating yourself. Sometimes even more so. Because you could be at this stuff for 6 months and then realize, wow, that's still there. And then think, well, it's not working. No, it's working. It just takes time. It just takes time. So be patient, really, all of us. But yeah, thanks for sharing. What else? Yeah.
I notice sometimes at the end you do something of sharing the merit.
Ah.
Could you explain that and how can practice in my daily life as a way to maybe kind of balance out tendency I have? I figure if I start doing more good things, then I don't pay so much attention of the parts of me I don't like, but at least it kind of brings everything back in balance.
Sure. You mean you have parts of it you don't like?
Oh gosh. Control
A
is
couple.
one of them.
Control. Yeah, I didn't even with everything you said, Ross, I didn't even bring up the control piece of what you said, but thank you for following up with
Control usually is because I don't like what I'm feeling outside, and I'm trying to control the outside, so maybe because I'm blaming everything else how I'm feeling inside, to start to let go of that sort. If something comes up, I'm stuck there. That's not their problem, it's my own issues. So I figure with sharing the merit maybe a way to...
Not at all, but I still think it's beautiful what you said. That's completely different, but I'll touch on sharing the merit, but I still want to highlight and focus on what you talked about, which is the reality that you can't control anything.
I know. Yeah.
Like nothing. You've heard me say this, but it's my favorite little meme thing where it's some person sitting on a beach looking out at the waves crashing with some little fruity drink with an umbrella in it, non-alcoholic, I'm sure. And it says, relax, nothing is under control. And, for me in this practice, like I spent the majority of my life trying to control people and places and things and was really good at it. And recognized how just dangerous that was to my life and the life of those around me, and how much suffering that brought me and into my life and those around me. And so this idea and ability, we'll start with the idea which then becomes this ability to try to control situations, it just destroys you.
Yeah.
Because you're stuck in this loop every single day of not being okay with anything, anywhere, ever. And as my first teacher once said, Venerable Ijur, she said, Jeff, learn to expect nothing from anyone, ever. And this idea of, what's that?
It's tough.
It's tough, but reminding yourself of that.
Yeah.
And I'll probably figure out a way to tie this into the merit question, but I still want to focus on that. It's really important to begin to understand that, I think it's important to begin to understand that when we are trying to control people and places and things, it's simply our dualistic mind that is saying, I don't like them, or I don't like how it is, or I don't like that situation. It's also important to understand that those thoughts and realizations you have aren't probably ever going to go away, nor are they inherently wrong, right? There's a lot of just disgusting, cruel, harsh things going on in this world, always have and always will. And this practice, again, for those maybe who might be brand new, it's not about, turning a blind eye to those things and just saying, well, all these things are okay. I'm Buddhist, so everyone can continue to hate people and treat people this way. No, that's not okay, right? But the question is, can we engage in those situations, in those with those people that we are viewing a certain way, with the open heart and mind, and not view them in a way of thinking we are better than they are? And this comes back to me, the Buddhist teachings on non-self, which so much is wrapped up in thinking, well, I am me, I am Jeff, and I have this way of thinking and viewing the world and being. And so then what am I doing to every other person I meet? I'm comparing their view to my view. And even if I'm not able to be at the view that I would like to have, I still have elevated myself potentially in a way to where I'm viewing other people and saying, well, you're not good enough because you don't have this view. This Buddhist stuff can be really dangerous. You know, you spend 20 years around this stuff and all of a sudden you start to use it as a lens of seeing how you think people should be. I call this Buddhist arrogance, right?
Yeah.
Which is really dangerous because, you know, you could be at this stuff for 6 months and all of a sudden you're trying to be kind and compassionate. And now all of a sudden you're judging everybody else for being certain ways when you were that way 6 months and a day ago, right? Or yesterday. So the arrogance of using Buddhist teachings or practice or views to judge others is really, I just always caution people around that. But coming back to this non-self is to realize that what right do we have to judge other people personally? And when we see what we don't like, we can engage with them and have love and compassion without hatred and anger. And the transfer of merit part is really about, in brief, for me, and everyone is taught it differently, but I was taught that when we do practice, meditation, Buddhist practice, things that we're cultivating, loving kindness, compassion, you know, this really beautiful action that we're bringing into the world, that we should give that away to others. That it's not about creating for us, but it's sharing the beautiful intentions of what we're working on with others who maybe need it more than we do. And that takes you out of the sense of self.
Yeah.
It's not about me. Like, I'm not sitting here this morning, I'm not practicing, I'm not cultivating loving kindness because it's all about me. I'm doing it so people don't have to deal with me in a way that's harmful.
Well, I mean, compassion, I developed compassion, studying compassion with other people, basically.
Yeah.
Like when they call Tonglen practice.
Yeah, Tonglen is a Tibetan practice, a beautiful practice of sending and receiving compassion, definitely. But always wanting to try to start with that self-compassion. Because if we have hatred and anger towards ourselves, which for me was my life for so long, it was really difficult to have true compassion for others. Yeah.
I can't give what I don't have, right?
Sure. Yeah, you could try, but yeah. What else? Yeah.
I'm not typically like a controlling person, but I have a family member that's in a bad situation, and I feel this like desire to want to guide them, or as if I know what's best for them, but they're very passive, so it's difficult for me to like watch them kind of being taken advantage of, and I feel a lot of anger and resentment towards the person who is doing that to them, and so I just don't know how to handle this situation, and I don't like sitting or having all these like anger and feelings inside.
Can anyone else in this room relate to that question? Every single person in this room. If their hand's not up, they're lying and they just didn't want to put their hand up, right? So let me just repeat that for those who virtually didn't hear it. Your question is around, you started out by saying you're not typically a controlling person. I love how you put typically in front of that. You know? As if we were going to judge you if you said, I am a controlling person. It's okay to admit you're a controlling person if you are. I'm not suggesting you are, but if you are, you know, be with that. So, but being that you're not typically a controlling person, you're having a really hard time with a family member who is very passive and you feel they're being taken advantage of, and you're having a lot of anger and resentment towards the person, I think you said, that is being this way towards your family member, and you're not sure what to do with those emotions, right? Is that fair? Yeah. So I think it's important, first and foremost, to which you are, just acknowledging the recognition of this situation. And to recognize that you have a desire to control this situation. And first and foremost, can you control it? Can you control that? The situation? That's a question.
I don't know. I mean, I feel like I can influence, but ultimately, like, the outcome is out of my hands.
Right. So you feel like you can influence it, but ultimately the outcome is out of your hands. Buddhist practice, to me, is about engaging with reality. Not creating the world of how we want it to be, but engaging with reality. And to me, what you just said, what you just shared and said is reality. Reality is you can influence it, absolutely. Having people know that we love them and care about them and are there for them can influence a situation. Having people who are doing harmful things know that you think it's harmful can influence a situation. But the Buddhist teachings on non-attachment remind us that we can share love and compassion with your family member, and even with the individual or individuals that are doing things that you don't like. You're sharing love and compassion because what you're seeing is causing pain and suffering, and you don't want that to happen. But can you do that without anger and hatred and resentment is the practice. And the practice of the non-attachment is to understand that regardless of how much you try to influence a situation, it is out of your hands. So surrendering control has a lot to do with the fact that there's nothing, it's not you. There's nothing wrong with wanting a situation to be better. Have you ever done things that were unhealthy in your life? Yeah. And have others witnessed that and wanted you to stop or change? Probably. We'll take that as a yes. And did you listen to them when they were trying to help you or change your actions?
I think it just like takes some time for it to sink in.
Okay. So can you use that same approach with your family member and understand it's going to take some time, or it may never sink in? But you just keep showing up. You know, this comes up a lot. You know, we do. Most people here know, or if you're here for the first time, maybe not. But such a large recovery community here. People, you know, any addiction that they're struggling with, and tying together Buddhism, Buddhist teachings, and addiction, and so much in that world here. It is also about watching other people you know suffer from addiction and feeling helpless. And a big part of this is understanding that each individual has their own journey, their own karmic path to create. And you can love them, but you can't control them, you can't fix them, you can't heal them. Everybody has to get to that place on their own. And ultimately, one thing you said, which is true, really, is you don't always know what the wisest thing is to do. And that's true. But what you fall back on is ask yourself, is my intention coming from love and kindness? Or is it coming from anger and hatred? And very often, I'll just kind of throw this out there, very often the people or person or persons that you resent and you're angry towards, they don't need more hatred and anger thrown at them. They actually need the same love and compassion, if not more love and compassion, than the family member that you're referring to. Because very often that person who is causing pain and suffering is really struggling with their own love and compassion towards self. So that's what they need. So, yeah, I wish there was a simple solution. There's not, but yeah.
Just kind of piggybacking on that, is there a practice that helps when you are trying to be there for somebody? Because sometimes you get sucked into their anxiety. I get very anxious when I'm trying to help somebody or they have an issue. Is there a practice because I also think that anxiety influences them. It's not a pleasant experience for them to feel your anxiety. Is there a practice that can help you to keep a detachment or a calmness about you?
Yeah. I wish I had like, hey, pick up this book and read page 27, you know, and there's your answer. You know, I'll share something I share often, but this was 30 years ago, and I was in college working in a group home with adolescent females, all who've been, you know, experienced tremendous trauma. And my kind of mentor at that time, she was the head psychologist of the space. She said, Jeff, when you show up to work with these kids, I'm convinced she was a closet Buddhist looking back on it now, but like, you know, at that time in Tucson, you know, she probably wasn't going to rock prayer flags everywhere. I remember she said to me, Jeff, when you show up to work with these kids, show up, all the love, all the attention you can give them when you're here, and just be with them, be present with them, experience what's happening, pour your heart out while you're here. And the moment you leave, meaning the end of your workday, as soon as that door hits, when you walk out, leave them here. And I've continued to use that practice because I can't carry their pain and suffering with me. And even in the way you worded your question, it sounds like what you're ultimately doing is crossing over into trying to, and I don't necessarily mean this in a bad way, even though it might sound like it, you're crossing over and trying to control or take their emotions, their pain, their suffering. And you can't. We can't, even though we can say like, I love someone, I care about that, I'm here for your pain, you can't take somebody's pain. You can feel it with them, you can be there with them, but you can't remove it from them. But it sounds like that's what you're really wanting to do, is remove their pain, which in essence is crossing over and trying to control their experience. And so I think there's this boundary, a wall. For me, it was a wall. I mean, it was just a cold, hard wall that I can see myself 30 years ago walking out of that place, because it was heavy. You know, listening to these kids share their experiences. And I'm like, you know, I've been reading Zen books for like 6 weeks at this time. And I remember walking out that door, and that door, I like can see a wall that I created in my mind. Their pain, their suffering. I cannot carry that on my back. I got enough of my own pain and suffering. And it might sound like we have a really hard time, I think, especially, you know, with loved ones, relationships, things like that, of trying to take on all their pain and carry all their suffering for them. Anyone ever done that and ended up healthy? You know, it destroys you. And if you are destroyed, you are of no use to anyone. You know, it's that oxygen mask example, you know, drops on the airplane, you know, and you put it on yourself first before the child. But I think we often I just caution us, and I have to remind myself of this all the time. I think we have to caution ourselves of being honest with how much we can really take on from people. And being able to say like, hey, I can't take this on. This is your mess. That's something I say in my head all the time, and I say here all the time. Your mess, not mine. And have a safe, healthy boundary. Because yes, you're right. If you don't have that wall, that boundary, that safety, then you get anxious, then you get sad, then you get to whatever those emotions are. And then absolutely they feed off of that. But to be able to say to somebody like, hey, this is your shit, not mine, and I'm here for you in any way, but I cannot carry your 3,000-pound backpack because I'm drowning also. So I think it just comes back to, and I don't want to turn this into like therapy, but like healthy boundaries of what you can take on realistically. And not confusing compassion in a Buddhist sense of meaning that you have to take on everybody else's stuff. Wisdom without compassion, or compassion without wisdom is dangerous. And the wisdom says, it's your mess, not mine. And that sounds harsh and cold, but, you know, yeah. So,
If I can
hang on, I'm going to go to the back there. Yeah.
It seems like there's I get the sense that like if we let go, that there's like a joy to be found underneath it all. But I guess I'm just curious like how to articulate that. Like why is life worth living?
So the question was, you get the sense that if we let go, there's a joy under that. You're having a hard time articulating that, but then your question is, why is life worth living? Yeah. So letting go does not mean you don't care. Letting go does not mean things don't matter. Letting go does not mean things are not important. Everything is important. Letting go means not letting go of what's happening. It means letting go of your attachment and effort to try to control every single freaking thing. And when you do that, from what I've read, yes, there's a lot of joy there. And when you have a lot of joy, you can then experience everything because it all matters. Everything matters. It's often confused, and I don't know if Buddhism is brand new to you or how far along. Where are you at in your Buddhist journey? Like 6 weeks, 20 years? Where are you at?
I think it's kind of been like in the air all my life, but I've never really engaged myself in it.
So it's brand new to you?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So for people who are really understanding what Buddha was teaching, and it is brand new, when the way you asked that question told me, and again, I don't mean offense by this, but I've been doing this a long time, told me this is all brand new to you, which means you might hear the phrase letting go, which I hate, because it leads us to have such a it leads us to have the view that I think you're asking about, which says, I'm going to let it go because nothing matters. Right? Being racist, being sexist, being homophobic, treating people that way. These things all matter. They are important. Letting go doesn't mean you just close your eyes in your own little place of safe privilege and think nothing matters. Everything matters. Everything is important. And, as far as the purpose of life, it's different for everybody. And you ever seen the movie City Slickers? So watch that. Forget Buddhism, just watch City Slickers. Groundhog Day, Fight Club, and The Matrix. The best 3 Buddhist movies that you could ever see. And City Slickers, because Billy Crystal will tell you what life is all about. In 2 hours, you will have the answer to your question. Yeah? So you can report back after you watch City Slickers. But yeah, everything matters. It's all important. Suffering sucks. Oh, go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, I used to feel bad for everybody, and then I felt I had caused their pain. It was my fault. And someone said something. It's not about feeling for, it's feeling with. You can be without, because if I take on their anger, then I'm stuck with anger. And sometimes I haven't done anything of the shame and guilt. So what do I do to fix something that's not mine in the first place?
Yeah.
So learn to just sit with instead of trying to. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's hard.
Yeah.
There's a question here, a couple questions here. Hang on. Yeah, so there's a question here. I'll just I'll read it. In our complicated society, I often feel many people, thoughts, ideas competing for my attention. The Buddha lived at a very different time. Did he speak of things competing for the mind's attention? I just want to, there's often people will ask questions and preface it as you have by saying, well, the Buddha lived at a different time. So it wasn't like how it is now, like it was then. The guy was a prince. He grew up as a king. They killed people. They tried to take over land. They were just as harsh and horrific back then as they are today. So I just want to always caution all of us, and I appreciate asking the question, that to say, well, it was different then than it is now, I'm never a fan of that, because it makes us think like, oh, things were simple in India 2,500 years ago. I'm not really sure what life was like then, but there was just as many complicated things as there are today. So today, to say the things that often people will say, which is like, well, life is so crazy today, it was simpler back then. Why? Because they didn't have iPhones? Did that make it simpler? They had something else to distract themselves with. They had other ways of living that were also complicated and confusing. So I think, the entire, really your question is, did he speak of things competing for the mind's attention? His entire body of teaching for 45 years speaks to and addresses everything competing for our mind's attention, which is why the cultivation of a meditation practice is so important. Because what the meditation practice is doing is it's creating space for you to cultivate being with present moment. Being with present moment in India 2,500 years ago was no different than being with present moment today. There's a present moment that exists. And we do not abide there because we're constantly trying to change the past and control the future. So all of his teachings, to answer your question, address dealing with the mind's attention. There's another question here. What do you do with negative feelings and thoughts? We're always going to have them. Yeah, definitely. You are always going to have negative feelings and thoughts. But I think 2 things are important. One, sit with them. Right? I mean, if I reflect on my journey, anytime I did stupid things, which was often, it always starts with a thought. And then that thought leads to words, and then that leads to actions. And so for me, with my practice, is to recognize what are the thoughts, what are the words, and what are the actions, and can I just sit with them and not go forward on all of them? Anyone here done anything really dumb? Right? Your whole life, we have done things, no offense, right, that are really dumb. Lovingly, of course. And our whole lives going forward, we're still going to do things that we're like, I really wish I hadn't done that. And so in those moments is to recognize that all of those actions come from thoughts, and we don't have to act on all of them. So learning to be with these thoughts as they arise, and by sit with them, meaning either, in kind of a formal meditation practice, whether it's sitting, standing, walking, lying down, whatever your meditation practice is, or if you're just going about your day and you're at the grocery store and you have a thought, right? You're not necessarily going to carve out time to have your perfect little meditation space, but to me, sit with them means just be with it. I know this will shock most people, but you do not have to yell every time you want to yell. You do not have to say every harmful thing every time you have a thought that is harmful. You do have the ability to create space to be with that thought. Before you tell everybody else or type to everybody else how wrong they are. You don't have to do that. I'm not suggesting you never do it. I'm just suggesting that there's a way and a time and a space to create an opportunity to choose. Is this harmful or is this beneficial to yourself and to others? So yeah, we're always going to have them, and learning to be with them is really important. And again, to my comment earlier, to not judge yourself for having them. There's another question here, and we'll wrap up here in a minute. Do you think it's more useful to meditate 1 hour per day or to meditate 3 times per day for 20 minutes? I think it's useful to abandon that entire idea of what is right or wrong as far as a meditation practice or schedule. I do think it's beneficial if you're brand new to meditation and you're just trying to cultivate a daily practice to have a set time as a routine. But I don't think it's necessarily beneficial to do one more so than the other. I think if you have this goal that I'm going to meditate, even in the way of your question, like, I'm exhausted reading your question, right? Like this idea that I need to sit for an hour a day. That sounds exhausting. And the idea of breaking it up into 3 20-minute periods is your way, to me, of trying to manage something that sounds exhausting to you. So when you sit, right? One of my favorite Zen expressions, when hungry, eat, when tired, sleep. So if you want to sit and do a meditation practice, sit and do a meditation practice. But I don't find it beneficial to get wrapped up in the length of time. Even here, still to this day, people have been doing it for years. As soon as the meditation bell hits, they'll look down at their watch to see how much time has passed, as if they've achieved some goal, right? I did it for 17 minutes today. Tomorrow I'm going to go for 18 minutes. Then you're just tying a goal to it. Just sit to breathe, not to attain anything, not to accomplish anything, not to achieve anything. Just sit to breathe and start there. And I'm going to share this last kind of comment and then we'll close. Compassion and the distinction of boundaries when needed. Yes, this can be hard for me and I can be abrupt, direct, unskilled. Yes. And that kind of goes back to my earlier comment, but I think that, abrupt, direct, and unskilled, the 3 words, maybe abrupt is unskilled. I don't necessarily, depending on how it is, find direct as being unskilled unless it's coming from a place of anger and hatred. But I think that it's a fine line. It is very difficult to determine how and when and where to set boundaries in your life of what you can take on. But regardless of the kind of description of abrupt or direct or unskilled, I think most important in this situation, underneath all of that, my suggestion is you have to be honest with yourself. And if you're honest with yourself about how much you can take on and how much you can't take on, then yes, sometimes that may come out as abrupt and unskilled. But then I think you can kind of like work with it from there. If you're honest with yourself of how much you can take on and setting that boundary, then maybe you'll be able to find a nice space where you can share that message without being abrupt. But yeah, it's super difficult. All right, so I'm going to close on that. We'll join palms. May the benefit of this practice be shared with all beings in all directions. May all beings be at peace. May all be free from suffering. May any merit gained from this practice be be transferred to Pam during her time of suffering, and to Mark and their family and friends who suffer at this time. May they all be at peace and free from suffering. All right, so a few quick announcements before you all head out. Thank you for being here. My name is Jeff. I'm a Dharma Bum. We opened up this temple 18 years ago to introduce Buddhist practice to those who show up. Those of us who lead, we're not monks, we're not nuns, we're not gurus, we're not masters, we're not teachers, we're not looking for students. We're just practitioners doing our best to take our understanding of Buddhist teachings and put it into terms that hopefully make sense to those who show up. Every night we have different practices going on from a different Buddhist tradition. Every Thursday, 4:30, we do, I think, probably one of the best things around here, food distribution program. We prepare gourmet vegetarian meals, also known as peanut butter and jelly, and we feed people who sleep on the street. So anytime you think your life kind of sucks and you lack gratitude for all you have in your life, feed people who sleep on a sidewalk, and it tends to put things into perspective. Other than that, the only thing I think out of the ordinary, this coming Wednesday, would be the 30th? Yeah, this Wednesday. Right, is this coming Wednesday the 30th? Yeah, thanks. Okay. So this coming Wednesday, we have a Tibetan Lama who'll be speaking. Wednesday nights have been going on and off with guest speakers and Bob and some other things. So we'll have a Tibetan Lama who was here a few years ago, but he'll be here Wednesday night at 7 o'clock. So if you've never sat with Tibetan Lamas or been around them, they're really amazing and fun and cool and funny and brilliant and compassionate, all those things. But so that'll be Wednesday night at 7. Other than that, thanks for being here. Buddha for you is down there if you need anything, and I'll see you soon.